I'm going to show you some examples of some common situations where manual layouts must be performed and how information from SoundDesign may be used to help. In the first example, we have a warehouse with 35-foot ceiling height and 78 dB SPL noise level. Let's say in this situation the horns have to be mounted on the 35-foot ceiling because of forklift activity. If we mounted the horns 18 feet high or so, then the forklifts would hit them and break them off. Entering this room into SoundDesign, I simply put in 400 by 150 with a 35-foot mounting height and a 78 dB SPL ambient noise level. The program does suggest that we try a lower mounting height. Of course, that's not possible in this situation. Notice the program suggests 2 horns per row times 5 rows for a total of 10 horns. The horn type is a 5-watt horn. The maximum spacing for this noise level and mounting height is 80 feet. What that means is you can use 5-watt horns 35 feet high up to 80 feet apart and still get 6 dB SPL over the 78 dB SPL ambient noise level. The program has designed for the horns to be along the 150-foot dimension. If I wanted to look at the spacing that results from the horns rows being along the 400-foot dimension, I simply press H as in Henry, like that. And the program automatically reconfigures and changes the spacing down here to reflect the rows being along the 400-foot dimension. And the resulting configuration would look something like this. You'd have 5-watt horns, you'd have a total of 10, and they'd be no more than 80 feet apart. But what if the area had high shelving? Shelving that was high enough to go almost all the way up to the ceiling. It looks something like this. Well, you need to know a couple of things. How high is the shelving? And is the construction of the shelving sound blocking? In other words, will sound pass from one aisleway to the other? Well, will the contents of the shelving make it sound blocking? A lot of times in new construction, the shelving itself is open, but once the end user moves in, the stock that they put on the shelving can make it sound blocking. If the shelving is not high enough to block the dispersion of sound, then no special measures need to be taken. You simply design for the area as you normally would, and try to choose your horn location so that the sound will be directed down the aisleways. If the shelving is acoustically open, meaning sound can easily pass between adjacent aisleways, you can simply space horns down every other aisleway. You can determine an appropriate horn spacing by entering a fictitiously sized area with the correct mounting height and ambient noise level into SoundDesign. The program will provide a maximum suggested spacing. I'll show you an example of that. Here's the resulting configuration from what we did earlier. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to change the length and width of the room, and I'm going to leave the mounting height and ambient noise level the same. And you'll see that the maximum spacing does not change. The maximum suggested spacing and horn type is independent of the size of the room and is solely based on the mounting height and the ambient noise level entered. I'm going to press B. I'm going to change this to a 50 by 25-foot room. I'm going to leave the mounting height the same and the noise level the same. And notice the max spacing did not change. It's still 80 feet. So for any given area, if you want to determine how far you can space horns apart and what type of horns it'll take based on ambient noise level and mounting height, just enter a fictitiously sized room, the correct mounting height, the correct ambient noise level, and this max spacing value and this horn type will tell you the limits you need to stay within. For acoustically open shelving, your configuration might look something like this with horns down every other aisleway. Notice the 2 horns on the right will cover that open area. It's not necessary to have a horn at the end of every aisleway because there's nothing there to block the dispersion of the sound. If the shelving is acoustically blocking, meaning sound cannot easily pass between adjacent aisleways, you can simply space horns down every aisleway. You can determine the appropriate horn spacing and type by entering the fictitiously sized area with correct mounting height and ambient noise level into SoundDesign. That's exactly what we did for the other example. With sound blocking shelving, your configuration might look something like this. You'd have horns, in this situation, they'd be 80 feet apart down every aisleway. Another situation that occurs is what if the area is not square or rectangular? SoundDesign designs for square or rectangular areas only. Well, you simply break the area into smaller square or rectangular areas and design for each separately. Suppose you had an L-shaped room like this. You just break it into 2 rectangles, like that, and design for each one independently. You design for one of the areas might look like this, and for the other area it might look like that. Another situation is what if the area has varying ambient noise levels? SoundDesign only allows you to enter one ambient noise level for an area. While using SoundDesign, determine an appropriate horn spacing for each significantly different noise level, just as we did previously. You go in, you enter a fictitious room with the correct mounting height and the correct noise level that you're going to evaluate, and SoundDesign will return a horn type and maximum spacing based upon that. Then you manually lay out the system on a set of blueprints or scaled drawing representative of the area. Use the appropriate horn type and spacing for each differing noise level. The resulting configuration might look something like this. You have a noisy area that may have 15 or 30 watt horns densely spaced together. You have a quiet area that might use 5 watt horns spaced rather far apart, and a moderate area somewhere in between. All these spacings and horn types can be determined from SoundDesign by simply entering any dimensions, a correct mounting height, and a correct noise level, as we have seen previously. That's the end of the example.